I'd like to do this.
So what if Amber gets here and she's like, oh, no, then what?
What are our options?
We don't, we take continuance, we pick a date and time, so the furthest we could push this out is probably Monday night. So we have to specify the date and the time, and so we can say, let's continue. So we get back into it. Continue it until next Monday at 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. Right? And then we got 5 days to figure it out.
But I mean,
Yeah, but then we find ourselves, so we can do continuance.
the other thing too is what I'd like to see is if we can get it, is have it in writing. So let's say.
Is this for the graveyard lot?
I think we should have this. It written out. One part, I think. One part, maybe. Responsibilities.
Post in the job. Oh,
Yeah.
you're saying of the sign.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
We have to stand on it, do it. So.
That's right. Well, that's why the motion says they would take the direction. From Joan.
But I mean, if they're kind of their name and then you get, say, you need to do this.
No, they would. Something just about.
We have the.
Yeah, or this, what do you think? Should I just handle or should we pause or something, right? Like, it didn't really come up before, honestly.
Like, stating that or making that clear, Mike? What the actual? So that needs to be clear.
Oh, yeah.
So. 'Cause otherwise. Step in.
Right, right,
That needs to be put out.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. I think talking now will help.
Huh?
I think the next conversation will help everything. Oh, no. I think,
No, assume it outside.
is it?
Okay, I'd like to call to order the City of Nisswa City Council Workshop for Tuesday, June 17th, originally scheduled for 5 p.m., but now starting at 5:35. With that, I'd also like to make a motion that item B on the agenda, the future planning discussion for the potential development of new city property on Highway 371 south of County Road 77, be continued to a future date because we are in the absence and in this gap space of not having an administrator or interim city administrator. I think it would be hard to have a very deep dive, detailed discussion and give direction because we don't necessarily have the person to lead staff, to take council input, and to be able to drive things forward.
I would like to clarify some things on the property. We won't go into how to develop and stuff like that, but most of the citizens, residents in Nisswa don't know that talks about this have been going on for almost 26 years. And that, so this has been looked at for many, many years. And the irony is the land that we ended up purchasing is pretty much what they were looking at in 2007. But that's all I wanted to say.
Do we need a motion or anything?
I made the motion. Do we have a second?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was a motion. I'll second it.
Is there any additional discussion about the land? Okay, all those in favor of continuing to a future date signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. The next item on here is the review of the government and city structure. Now this one in the packets for everybody, our previous interim administrator, Tim, had prepared a presentation that he was intending to go over with us as a council to walk through the different structures of local government in Minnesota, and I trust everyone had a chance to look through that. He also then provided, there was a City of Nisswa Clerk Administrator study that was done in 2017 as well. So that report was also in our packet, as well as a memo from the previous administrator, Jenny Max. And then also Tim had a proposed City of Nisswa action plan, so like a 30, 45, 90-day action plan. And he had communicated to me that he went over this action plan when he met in his meet and greets with each council member to brief everybody on this. But there were things that he was hoping to get guidance and direction from the council on tonight. And some of it, again, maybe we may kind of be in that limbo phase until we get, we'll figure out the governing structure and then drive forward there. But that was the first thing he wanted to get affirmation on from the council, is to get affirmation on our current structure of an administrator, or if there were direction from the council on a change in the governing structure. And so I guess I'd like to just start there and open it up to council for feedback, thoughts, perspective on the governing structure. Mark, do you want to start?
Well, if we go and look at the study, I mean, even their recommendations from that study was that we have that we move forward with creating an administrator clerk position. The list of the reasons why, I mean, do I go through it all? But that was the recommendation after the whole thing. So I think that's where we need to go with the city administrator full-time. That's my thought. That's where I stand.
Okay. Bruce?
Not sure at this point.
Okay. Jesse, your thoughts?
I would like to see the city administrator position be fulfilled here with longer term perspective of merging it with the clerk position. Evaluating, looking at the material from appeared to be David Don and Associates. It's in the packet. Page. It's actually the second to last page in the report from DDA, which was from 2017, I believe. It is a city administrator / clerk position on here. And the structure below is there's a deputy clerk that reports to the city administrator clerk, then the rest of the department heads underneath. And above the city administrator clerk, of course, is the city council, then above that citizens. I think this structure makes sense. Seems to me that we've slightly frayed from it, maybe just on the form of titles or duties and responsibilities since we went out and sourced our first city administrator, in, I believe it was 2017. So I like this format. Merging the two, I don't think needs to be an immediate priority because we have to, of course, find our replacement full-time city administrator if that's the direction the council wants to go. Merging the two positions, I think, is wise and perhaps even targeted by the end of this year or first quarter of 26. Joe?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot to comment on. I also think, that's a good direction to start looking based upon everything that I've learned the last few weeks and months from the attorneys and even from Tim, the other resources, as we would build that structure. I guess I'd have specific questions, kind of like maybe what you have, Jesse, with the deputy clerk, stuff like that, what the timeline looks like, but I guess I'm not opposed to exploring that.
And I mean, additionally on this, it's missing the position of financial specialist. Unless I'm missing it somewhere. No, it's missing that position that would need to be added, of course. But this is from 2017. I don't have ingrained in my memory what the org chart for the city looks like today, but I would imagine it reflects Kiki or Maggie's position since she's been here. I think it's her 12-year anniversary today, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, happy belated anniversary. And then, yeah, that's all I have actually.
I tend to be in agreement with, well, an administrator clerk is still sticking with an administrator structure. Right, so I am in agreement with that as well. And the way that Tim had explained, like the deputy clerk to me is, he said it's also kind of like an admin position, right? It'd be someone that could do some of the administrative responsibilities, perhaps be like the conduit at the front, also help with the elections and whatnot. So that's how he had explained it to me. His explanation seemed to make sense. And again, I agree. I think the more immediate pressing need is finding the long-term individual for that role, and then looking at, a structural change within an administrator structure can happen at any time.
From my takeaway from my first and subsequently last meeting with Tim last Wednesday was that structure, from what he is used to, obviously larger cities, and I understand and respect that, but the liaison positions and the subcommittees that we have also are not necessary based off of proper structure and it being abided to, such as personnel committee or liquor committee, possibly public works committee. The planning and zoning committee is essential. But on the basis of having the city administrator / clerk position being the effective quarterback of the city staff as the CEO, general manager, you name it, running the show, the council reports, or excuse me, the city administrator / clerk reports to the council. The council does not bypass that clerk and go to the other department's heads, is how he related to me, as it fitting from his existing structures from his positions in the past.
Correct. So I spent extensive time with Tim, probably every single day that he was here, multiple times on the phone. So yes, he did articulate that. But also one difference, and it is a key difference, and it should be noted, is if you look at the cities where he came from like Golden Valley was his most recent position, and that's a statutory B city where the voters voted on that type of structure. And that is a structure where the council literally, they, for the most part, they can hire and or fire the city manager, not a city administrator. And then they pass a budget for the most part. But the city manager runs the show. The city manager is in charge of everything else. Everything runs through that city manager, correct? You wouldn't necessarily have liaisons. Council wouldn't be reaching out to staff. Everything would flow through the city administrator, or through the city manager in that instance. And Anoka was largely the same way from my understanding. I think we're a little bit different of a city. We're not as large, we're a bit smaller. So I think it's kind of an apple and an orange in some senses.
Well, the thing I don't like about a management structure is the fact that they have the power to hire and fire anybody they want to, not coming through the council. I don't like that.
Yeah, and our
For the
city is,
administrator, it has to come through the council.
yeah, our ordinance, we're set up different. We're a statutory A, and our city is driven by our ordinances. Council hires and fires everyone, right? So in our case, like, for example, just say a department head, like, yes, the administrator as it stands now is going through that process. But there are other cities that are set up like us where, you know, and I heard this from different council members when I was running for mayor of like, oh, we're not as involved. We want to be leading more. We want to have more involvement in the city and know what's going on. Is that if you have a very communicative individual in that role, no council member should ever feel that way, right? And there's also cities that do things where, like the administrator, again, using the example of hiring, let's say a department head, they would go through and go, you know, post the position, source the resumes, do the first round, but they might include a council member or two, perhaps, to be a part of that, and for the final round, right? So that there is some council involvement in that. So there are carve-outs in that sense. So again, that's more getting into the minutia, which can be determined, doesn't have to be determined today, but those are just some of the things that were explained to me. But that's, I guess that's a broader question for this council. Does this council want to have more involvement or not have more involvement, right? In that sense, right?
Well, Jesse's correct in the fact that when you have an administrator, that's generally, they take on the liaison position. However, and I agree with Jesse on that. That's why you have an administrator. They are the liaison between the department heads and the council. With that said, I think some of our department heads would find comfort in having a council liaison. I'm just saying that, you know, I haven't taken a survey, but I think they would feel more comfortable in, you know, that's how it's been done forever. But so maybe we stick with that at first and then phase it out, you know. Because if I were in that situation and somebody was in here that, I'm just saying, if someone came in, they didn't have the best interests of that department head, they may not be just bringing stuff forward to us, and then you have a this and that, so. I think at first we just keep it and then look at phasing it out. That's where I stand.
You know, I like the idea of the full-time city administrator. I think we
Okay.
need something like that.
Okay.
And I think we should, work on something like that.
Okay, well, it sounds like there's agreement by this council to stick with the administrator structure. So then the next item that was on that Tim wanted to get our perspective on or to get guidance on was, okay, if we're at a city administrator, he wanted to look for direction on whether the council would be interested in having a council committee that would lead the process or hire a search firm. And if a search firm, the idea would be to start collecting proposals.
Do we have a cost of a search firm? I mean, I think they used a firm the last time, didn't they?
I think it was this DDA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
The number he gave to me, that he said to me just loosely, is he said anywhere between 15 and 30,000.
15 to 30,000?
15 to 35 is maybe what he said. That might not be precise, but that's, again, he was giving a range and I thought that's a range because I said, wow, that's kind of expensive, right? But again, in here, he said if the council were interested in hiring a search firm, then, you know, he was going to begin collecting proposals to then come back to council with. So it might not be 15 to 30, it could be less, right?
So just my question back to kind of Mark's point too, you know, and some stuff that's been brought up here in the past, you know. I don't know if involvement's the right word, but for instance, this building project, you know, us having the ability to give Tom more authority as the department head for like change order, stuff like that, then when it comes up. Our current structure is not set up that way, you know, and so also to doing that dive in ahead of time so that we're all on the same page, because it is a broad range of the way it can be set up versus the way that you explained it, Jennifer, and the way that Tim was explaining it, kind of maybe big city, little city. I think that's important thing. I'm not sure when the correct time to kind of dive into some of those issues are, but that'd be an important thing to all talk about too and get on the same page with on how we want it to look. Just using that as a current example in our city.
I think those things should be discussed before we get a full-time administrator, if we do. I mean, so yeah, because because some of that may have to be, do we have to change, tweak the job descriptions and so forth? But yes, because it kind of ties their hands if they have something come up and they can't do it. And then they got to come to us at the next meeting and we have to, so it pushes the time out. So yes, I think that's one of the things we need to look at.
I think that's also goes to the third item that Tim wanted to come to the council with is on hiring a consultant, but I don't want to jump to that yet. Getting past this, what council's thoughts are on having a council committee lead the process for searching for an administrator or hiring a search firm. I'll share my perspective out of the gate. I mean, I am very fiscally, right? Everyone knows where I stand on that, like finding ways to keep taxes flat for next year or even find a cut if we can. But to me, I think a search firm would make sense, just in terms of people that have a pool of folks to go to or have those networks, because having a council committee lead it, would only be able to be two of us is, I can just say, I don't have time right now, right? I mean, I've been struggling to keep my head above water at this point.
Yeah, you should engage the services of a search firm. The sort of candidates that you're looking for are going to expect to go through a process like that rather than something else. And may discard the notion of getting involved in a search if it sources somehow else. I think I recall, we can fact check this, but I think I recall when this happened 8 years ago, that Sourcewell was involved from the standpoint of some matching funds for a search, would take the edge off of that sticker shock, but you're gonna have that kind of expense. But I want to say they matched it. That's worth looking into.
Good.
Joe,
Yeah, I agree. A search firm.
Jesse, Bruce,
Yes.
Mark? Okay. The next thing Tim had was, and this is under the 45 days, if council stays with the current form of government, analyze administrative staff structure to be sure duties and responsibilities align well to best deliver services. This could be changing positions, job duties, right? And this, I think, comes up under that, like if it were to shift to the administrator clerk and deputy clerk and how that looks. So he had reached out to a consultant who focuses on kind of this structure, personnel management, all of that, and had gotten a scope of services. And so he wanted to come to the council and ask if there would be direction to hire the consultant not to exceed 5,000 to do the analysis.
Yes, I also agree that, to have a consultant come in and help us with that and define this stuff would be a good idea.
Who's the consultant firm?
We actually interviewed him as a second finalist, Keith. He talked a lot in that interview about how he has his own consulting firm. He is farmed out all over the state to different governing bodies to do exactly this.
And what exactly will his firm be providing for scope?
So it's my understanding that Tim and Keith had some meetings and conversations, and then this is the scope that he was waiting on from Keith, which came shortly after he was not here.
Yeah, so it looks like meet with staff, meet with us. Kind of sit down and figure out the structure and what would work the best moving ahead. Is my understanding.
Mark, any input? Bruce?
Regarding this, Keith, I think he'd be useful.
Jesse?
So essentially, the organizational assessment that he'd be performing is gonna provide us a report to some extent. He's gonna offer an opinion outlining an action plan, a roadmap
Yeah.
for the city of Nisswa.
Yep.
Okay. Is that to help us provide clarity onto our structure?
I think so.
Have
And to
six
have
personnel?
clear, yep, like clear on the job descriptions, clear on the
Roles and.
roles and responsibilities, that
Abilities of
org
everybody.
chart, some of the stuff that Joe just mentioned, like, hey, can we give department head a higher right? Some of these things, all these things could factor into this.
When the council's involved, when the council's not involved.
Yep.
Okay.
Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
move ahead with it.
All right, and then the last one he had was for council to determine if amendments are needed to the city's comprehensive plan. The process was last done starting in 2017, adopted in 2019. But then the specific one that was highlighted is the planning and zoning ordinance. He was looking for council to give direction to proceed with working with Chris Pence for, as it relates to planning and zoning ordinances. I believe that came up at our last council meeting, but it was a loose discussion. And in Tim's time here, we did have a meeting and sit down with Chris Pence so they could meet and he could hear, from him, right, the consulting services he would provide in the planning and zoning area. And so that was the last one on this item or under this workshop of government structure.
Aren't they working together right now? Some of the ordinances?
Yeah, this is to keep moving in that direction.
Right,
Yeah, so
yeah.
Chris came up here, met with, Stephen and Tim, myself and Jennifer and stuff, and Chris kind of laid out some stuff, talked about some different stuff to kind of keep moving. It's just still going down the same, path or foundation that Bethany had started.
right.
Just carrying on with that, as
Mhm.
you're familiar with. So.
Sounds good to me.
Bruce, Bessie, and then Joe. Okay.
Yep.
That was basically what he had.
Mhm.
Does anyone have anything else that they want to speak about related to it?
I don't.
I guess my question, to move ahead with finding a consultant, is that something, that we're gonna assign to the new interim city administrator right away as first duties to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then also the scope of services from Keith,
From
right?
Keith, yeah,
And the Chris
Keith
Penn,
going
right?
on.
Yes.
again, Chris, okay.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I guess a motion to adjourn the workshop would be in order.
I so move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Right.